the rights of nature represents a paradigm shift.
What's beautiful at this stage about the rights of nature movement?
Corporations coming in and they're given rights as if they're people.
Unless we learn to live with nature, we are the ones who will pay the price.
Oh, it's a question of whether the concept of a fairy fort operates very effectively as a means of environmental protection, which it does.
You don't regard nature as a resource, you regard it as a relative.
With the acknowledgement of the rights of nature under the law, communities have been acting to protect woodlands, rivers, mountains and ecosystems, to protect their rights to exist, to flourish and to regenerate.
When we talk about rights of nature, in the most basic terms, we're talking about the legal recognition of legal rights for the natural world.
In law, the rights of nature represents a paradigm shift, when a fundamental axiom of human understanding no longer holds true. This happened, for example, when Copernicus argued that the Earth is not actually the center of the universe. The rights of nature assert that a new, humbler and more life-sustaining vision is emerging. One where we humans take our respectful places alongside other communities of species and ecosystems as part of a remarkable tapestry of life. This is a revolution in perception and in language too. It's a turning away from a human-centered vision of dominance and privilege to one of deep interdependence and care.
What's beautiful at this stage about the rights of nature movement is that we're broadening the perspective. That's what nature teaches us. It teaches us that it's in the interconnections, and it's in the relationships, and it's in the edges and the borders.
Many legal systems treat nature as property. If you own land, you have the right to enjoy it, to develop it, or even to destroy it.
Our campaign is really to protect our water, our air, our land and our health from the toxic pollution of gold mining. To be able to recognise nature as having rights instead of like corporations coming in and they're given rights as if they're people. And for nature now, to consider nature having rights really just turns the whole thing around, and it's a very exciting sort of prospect. And I think that, it's bringing balance to the whole equation.
For too long, we have treated nature as a field of objects, as other, as dead matter to be owned and turned into things to sell, exchange, and consume.
Governments fail to protect nature, which unfortunately we see over and over again. Nature doesn't possess legal rights even to exist. And so environmental laws are all about how do we regulate, how do we use and exploit nature, and which essentially treats nature as existing for human use.
Well, I think it has to start, I guess, with the rise of the Enlightenment, or at least certain types of Enlightenment thinking, which privileges and isolates the individual over the social and the ecological. And this leads to the separation of mind and body, mind or humans and nature, and all these separations, which I think we're dealing with, as opposed to being immersed in as a participant.
Think about it, like the rivers and the mountains and all, they're part of our community. It's not just the people that live here are the community. So it's a whole landscape. And that, I think that when you realize that, you see that we are dependent on each other. And I think this point has become very clear from the climate crisis and from the pandemic. People are realizing the importance of nature.
I am a salmon in the pool. I am a lake on the plain. I am a word of knowledge. I am a spear in battle.
Ireland was sort of the first project of colonialism. It was where a lot of the techniques of the Enlightenment and the techniques of colonialism were kind of first tried out. Different forms of plantation, different forms of kind of undermining the local culture, destroying the local culture, removing access to old kind of education systems so that it could be, you know, making the language itself illegal. All those processes were sort of the first step of capitalism coming into being, because in order for this process of where you can maximize profit out of a landscape or kind of turning a piece of land with all its different types of you know, cultural values or traditional values, religious values, all those values had to be made meaningless apart from the pursuit of the maximization of that land for the pursuit of profit.
These are the last couple of centuries of capitalism, of neoliberalist philosophy, which is actually the most raw and direct way of saying that this world is made of objects. So capitalism is the epitome of objectifying thinking, taking away from other subjects their agency, their subjectivity, and their inner experience.
Perhaps the greatest challenge to our own narrative on how we live and share this island is to move from claims of ownership to claims of belonging.
In historical commons, as Indigenous people know only too well, there are these rich, emotional, psychic, spiritual, cultural traditions that are part of one's personal memory. And you don't regard nature as a resource, you regard it as a relative. And you have relationships with these things which are part of your identity.
What humankind can do is we can amass our knowledge of living sustainably, of living harmoniously in a particular area and pass it down from generation to generation. And so we have this massive body of knowledge that tells us how to fish, where to fish, how to respect the land, how to respect the seasons, how to thrive and how to allow all of the rest of nature thrive along with us. And it all happens to be encoded within both the Irish language and the mythology and the stories that are passed down to us that are all about knowing our place in the world and respecting it.
Of course, the thing about language is that how we talk about the environment, how we think about the environment, how we represent the environment to ourselves. This is crucially mediated through the words that we use and the language that we have at our disposal.
I suppose that's clearest seen in the many, many stories that you will find in every parish in Ireland of the Glasgainach or the Glasgaunach, basically the green fort cow, the green streaked cow who gave bountifully of herself to feed her people as long as she was looked after, as long as the meadows and the sort of the grass areas and the water and the irrigation in the environment was looked after, then she gave bountifully. And the moment that she was exploited, she stopped and her people starved. Now that's a story we've been telling ourselves for, I don't know, at least 1,500 years, most likely 2,000, maybe 2,500 years, and possibly far longer. And that's just one example. There are countless ones of those.
The rights of nature is a beautiful new conversation which is seizing imaginations all over the world and is part of a new transitional narrative which we can share here on the island of Ireland. Derry City and Strabane District Council has become the first local authority on these islands to respond to a community demand for a charter that would protect the rights of nature.
It is a brand new concept, so I think the really positive thing about the motion is that it opens the question to determine what can the rights of nature mean for this council area, but also it commits to declaring the rights of nature for this council area. And I think the other important part of the motion is that it invites other councils north and south to do the same, because obviously the environment and climate change sees no borders.
This earth will be here long after we are. It will continue to be the source of the law. The question is, can we continue to ignore that? Can we continue to ignore the rights of nature and our responsibility to act accordingly? Because unless we learn to live with nature, we are the ones who will pay the price. So it's not a question of can we find the way to recognize the rights of nature. It's that we must recognize the rights of nature if we want to be able to find the way that we can live in harmony with the earth. It is our interest and our need to find that harmony which will show us the way forward.
When the morning breaks and the light comes flooding down on all our lives and the air is singing, who sings the stars down from the darkness? Who cracks open the dawn? Us, cry the blackbird and the thrush. Us, cry the red-breast robin. Us, cry a band of wrens, sing in the fresh green branches. All join in the dawn chorus. No words can describe the music of the tribes of the air, who sings away the hag of winter, who sings the sun up into the morning, who cracks open the dawn. Us, cry the blackbird and the thrush. Us, cry the red-breast robins. Us, cry a band of wrens, singing in the fresh green branches. All join